Hello, internet friends. My name is Bay. Welcome back to the Shadowlands Alpha First Pass First Impressions of freaking Arcane Mage. Oh my good gracious glob. Strap in. just strap the heck in, because I'm gonna make this part of the video short and sweet. All right. I'm here because of your support. Thank you for enjoying all the coverage so far. Secondarily, I will not be going over every single individual thing and will not be able to go over every single possible permutation. However, if you want all of that, there's links in the description box below. There's the entire 5+ hour testing VOD. There's the dungeon run. And of course, all the previous coverage is also there in the channel guide link, or over on my Twitch channel, !guide in chat. But I'm also here because I am a Corsair and Elgato partner. I've been a Corsair fan for a very long count of years, even before I signed with them. But if you're looking for any upgrades for your current rig, any bits and bobs or pieces and parts for an upcoming build, or you just spilled a whole bunch of seltzer on your keyboard and you might need a new one, I'm a K70 fan myself. And check the link below in the description box and the pinned comment. You can support what I do here on the internet by getting yourself some awesome Corsair gear or Elgato gear with 10% off and free standard shipping. And it supports what I do here on the channel. Without further ado, holy crap, the Arcane Mage. Longest testing session so far. I'm going to go through all the basic mage stuff, and then we'll get into all of the arcane goodies. So, notes at the ready. God, this is absolutely wild. Fire Mage had one pivotal change that sort of changes how they work on. Frost Mage has some stuff, some of it shaking. Arcane is like, you know what? It's not an expansion in World of Warcraft without a whole bunch of changes to the Arcane Mage. So, things that are baseline to all mages, unless you already had it, are things like Arcane Explosion. You got Frostbolt back. You got Fire Blast back. It does damage and slows. And obviously, you already had this, so that didn't change. And Fire Blast is a 12-second base cooldown reduced by haste. Frostbolt's the base 2-second cast, has that 50% snare there. You've also got every mage has... Sorry, I'm looking at this Jello mold here real quick, and this cake, you know, just saying. You've all got your mirror images. All mages have mirror images baseline. They only have 10% of your health, but they do help you tank stuff and pull threat and things, so that's kind of fun. Mages can solo those elites, maybe. Blast them before they blast you. They also got Fire Ward and Frost Ward back. They absorb a little bit of frost or fire damage. They share a cooldown. They are off the GCD. Only one ward may be active at one time, but of course you can combine that ward with your actual spec ward as well, your spec shield in this case, the prismatic barrier. And that, of course, can combine. This is some great effect, actually. Prismatic barrier still has that 20% reduced incoming magic damage, which makes that shield essentially 20% stronger against magic, which then, if you stack that with Frost Ward or Fire Ward, multiplicatives go with absorbs, making the Arcane Mage that little bit more defensive. I will also note displacement is gone. Didn't want to talk about much on the stream today, but displacement, that Mage LeBlanc League of Legends call out re-blink is gone. That is because Altered Time is back. More on that in just a moment, because I want to finish up with the mirror images here. There is some slight differences currently with mirror images across all three mages. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think this happens on live, but again, let me a comment. Let me have a comment down below. Frost bolts from the Frost Mage mirror image are have the slow, a slight slow. I think it's 30% slow, and they cast faster but deal less damage. Fire Mage is just flat damage, higher damage than the Frost bolts. No ignite, no nothing else, but just the higher base damage. Currently, right now, they were hitting for about 100-ish. The Frost bolts are about 60-ish. Arcane has their own actual arcane charges built in. As we go over here to the target dummies, they actually have their own arcane charges built in, We were talking about this today because this comes into play later on for reasons we will get into, of course, in this video. But they have their own. As you watch, their damage will go up. We got 67 here. We got 78 here. We got 88. And we got 106, 107, and then 130. It does not increase their casting speed like you do when you have your arcane charges. It just increases their damage. But keep that in mind because that actually does impact something later. They will scale with your incanter's flow a little bit. You see the damage going up and down a little bit there. But that seems to be all they really scale with. They weren't scaling with anything else. Because incanter's flow is directly impacting the snapshot of the... That's such a weird scene. So I'm not sure if they're scaling with arcane power correctly or not yet, because some things, as we will also get into later in this video, are not hooked up yet for the Arcane Mage. So more on all of that as we go through all of these things. Additionally, we do have... Let's go back up here. Again, Altered Time. That's the next step here. Altered Time. Comes back a little 58. Not 52, 58. It's a 1 minute cooldown. This is the defensive version only. A big thing that happened in the past was Altered Time, as many mages may reminisce about this in the comments if you'd like to, or tell me your like most ridiculous Altered Time moment. This is only a defensive version. It's for movement and anti-movement. It only works with putting down essentially your past self, as it does in the combat log, says your past self, and either 10 seconds later, up to 80 yards away, falling out of line of sight on your mount. Doesn't matter if you're within 80 yards, 10 seconds later, you snap right back to that position. You'll have the health you had then, not the mana. You will not have or keep any of the buffs, trinkets, anything else. You just essentially return to that position. It's a heal, it's a defensive, it's a movement ability where you have to take to move somewhere else. You drop your Altered Time, then you can blink somewhere, and then you'll get snapped right back. Has a bit of that demonic circling-ish to it. Has a bit of that monk vibe. And that is what is going to be not a DPS button, really. Even though movement is kind of DPS, so it still is a bit of a thing. Additionally, you're going to have some bonuses here while leveling up. Arcane Barrage rank 3 gives you 2% of your maximum mana per arcane charge spent. Keep that one up here in the noodle. This one's also a big deal. POM at your rank 2 at 54 gives you 1 additional cast. Right now, of course, you just have the blam and the bloom. That's the 2 of them right there. And Arcane Power will be increased by 5 seconds at level 56 for its rank 2. Side note, as this sort of like blanket the entirety of the Arcane Mage, Arcane Power is now a 3-minute cooldown currently. And before you get, raise your torch and pitchfork. It's alpha. Many things are up to change, even though this really kind of just works. And hopefully you'll sort of see that as I paint this crazy tapestry of the Arcane Mage for you. 10 seconds, it'll be 15 seconds at 3 minutes when you get the rank up. It's still 30% more damage and 30% cost reduction. Overpowered is still here at 60 and 60. I'm standing around here in Time Anomaly because it's kind of funny. But that is a core baseline adjustment as well. Additionally, clear casting has a rank 3. You get at level 32, which adds 2 more stacks. So you can have 2 more stacks of clear casting, which means you can have 3 stacks. If I can actually stack that up right now, there's 2. And let's see if we can get 3 in here. Let's presence of mind. There's 3. So with, say, Slipstream, you can do a lot like this. I also have amplification on right now. There's also that rank of clear casting you get on the way up much earlier that adds 1 extra missile. Amplification adding 2 more missiles. So a whole bunch of missiles fire off in total during the clear casting window. It goes 5, goes 6, 7 in total right here, if I do recall. A whole bunch. I basically just spam with missiles right there, right? A whole bunch of missiles, and they may become a bigger role in the Arcane Mage moving forward in this iteration. Additionally, let's see. Oh yeah, Arcane Empowerment still exists, which means you can possibly get 5 stacks in PvP or war mode situations. I don't really go over PvP talents and war mode, you know, talent builds and stuff. Not a lot of things have changed. A lot of things have just been removed. But overall, you can have 5 stacks, maybe. And of course, you'll get more damage per stack. So 5 stacks would be 25% more damage on top of that. And again, keep it in your noodle for one moment here. Let me get through all these things. We went through the spell ranks. Good to go. Slow also got buffed. There's a new rank 2 of it while you're leveling up to add 10% more slow to slow. So now it's even more slow. Duh. This one's not immune to CC, but this one is. I don't understand it. But yeah, so slow. There you go. Even though you also have Frostbolt now. So you can have Frostbolt and slow. I'm not sure when you'll ever really cast Frostbolt. It's going to be a weaker slow than slow. But flavor. Fire Blast. I don't know. Conjure freaking Mana Gem as well. All right, 3-second cast reduced by haste gives you a heckin' Mana Gem. It gives you 10% of your mana and holds up to 3 charges. You cannot create another Mana Gem if you only have 1 charge left of that Mana Gem. You've either got to use it or yeet it and then remake it. It will disappear, of course, if logged out more than 15 minutes, whatever. It gives you 10% mana when you use it, and it gives on a 2-minute cooldown. You can use as many as you want in combat. There's no limit. You can have 3 for the fight. If the fight lasts long enough, you can stand still and say, if I use my Mana Gem, you can recast it in combat. It'll still be on the same cooldown it had beforehand. And just, there you go, more Mana Gem. Sure, it does cost some upfront mana to cast. So I wonder if recasting it would be a thing that really matters. Granted, your mana is going to still be a resource still for the Arcane Mage. But I think there are ways, this included, and this included, that the burn conserve style of play is a bit smoother. You definitely have the burn window. It syncs up considering that you're gonna have arcane power and mirror images that are gonna sync up every other. Right, because it's gonna be 0, 2, 4, 6, 8 minutes, and your arcane power will be 0, 3, 6, 9. And then the presence of mind is every 1 minute. What else we got here? Ring of Frost has a big old slow after the incapacitate wears off now, which is kind of huge, which does give you the option of things like Chrono Shift, which is also the slow, and your sprint, or things like double Frost Nova, and then the huge slow if you use Ring of Frost. Usually a lot of times Chrono Shift becomes just the better option most of the time, because you can still do the little bit of that sprinting action even with no charges to spend. So that does help you out in those sticky situations. You can hit that on the move and then also hit Fire Blast. Also, remember all that stuff I just said. Savant. It's been a weird one for a long time. Your mastery. It still increases your max mana and your mana regeneration. And arcane charges increase the damage of... Wait a minute, hold on a second. In the giant blue post, this is not currently hooked up yet. So a lot of what I'm about to get into is also sort of up in the air because we don't know how this is going to scale. The S word. In the original big old water cooler post that Blizzard posted, the post they posted. Good stuff, Adam. Mastery Savant will now extend its damage increasing properties beyond Arcane Blast and Barrage to all spells. To all spells. Now, I submitted a bug report asking for clarification on this, and of course to confirm that it's not hooked up yet. Is that all spells on the mage? Is that all arcane spells? Because before right now it only interacts with things that use arcane charges in some way. But if it's all spells, that means that it will also increase arcane orbs damage. It will also increase more of Nether Tempest damage or scale it higher. It will also increase the damage of things like Supernova. Be ever it's so humble, Supernova might actually be usable if it actually did more damage than none. It'll also increase things like maybe your Arcane Familiar, because it's a passive spell and it uses the old barrage animation. And again, amplification and clear casting and arcane missiles will scale additionally with your mastery, because right now, of course, it's only blast and barrage, and I guess in a way, not really. I mean, Arcane Explosion feeds you arcane charges, but that means it's going to also increase in damage per arcane charge, or just flatly. We don't know yet. And that changes the option for certain talents and changes what may or may not work really well on the Arcane Mage if everything sort of has this mastery scaling behind it, and you're playing around with mana really heavily here. So having more of it and more mana regeneration and some other tweaks we'll get into here in a moment. Like I'm sitting here with Time Anomaly again, right? Time Anomaly is a deck-based talent if you've never ever used it. This is a sidebar here. It's a deck of cards. It picks one card. I was told how this works. I'm going to assume, otherwise I'm not being fed the wrong information. If I'm incorrect, let me know in the comments down below. It picks one card every 2 seconds. The deck has 16 cards in it. What happens there is that one yes, and then the rest are no's. But that does mean that over the course of 32 seconds maximum, you will get one yes. Then that yes picks a random of the 3 procs you see there. The 8 seconds of arcane power, the 1 second evocation, or the charged up proc for 4 arcane charges. However, it does not proc charged up if you have 3 or 4 arcane charges. So if you are at 3 or 4, if you're building to the burn window, or if you're in your burn window, or if you're floating around with a bunch of mana, then if you're at 3 or 4, you won't get charged up. You'll just get a second of evocate, which again, if you might stack more mana, which increases your mana regeneration on top of an evocate stacking on top of that, or of course it'll give you arcane power for the 8 seconds there, which is a lot longer of a cooldown. So getting that rotationally, it just charged up from me right there, rotationally getting more arcane power so that you can react to. I ran time anomaly in the dungeon footage. So if you want to go check out like how it looked with me playing like goofy Arcane Mage, it's the second most mage spec I've played, but every iteration freaking changes every single time, right? And normally I just play Fire Mage as an alt, but it felt fine because I wanted to try a build that was both AoE-ish, we did the vampire dungeon, and single target-ish. And we're also testing out focused magic, which we'll get into here more in a moment. So that's a pretty crazy change if Savant hooks up like that across all of your spells. It may not give any reason to cast Frostbolt if it does more damage, because again, is it arcane spells? It also might give a weird synergy to Fire Blast, because weaving that into your rotation in, say, a Rune of Power window with arcane power going, and if it scales up as well, may be worth it for the return of and the baselining of your new rotational cooldown. And the big shake up to all of this, the previous like 15 minutes of dialogue, all leads into Touch of the Magi baseline. The good, the bad, and the ugly. This is your new 45-second cooldown. It's a 1.5 second cast reduced by haste, where you apply the Touch of the Magi to your current target. It accumulates 50% of the damage you deal to the target for 8 seconds, and then explodes for that amount of arcane damage to the target and reduced damage to all nearby enemies. Now, I will also say, I ran this with the build that I was doing in the dungeon, had some pretty juicy Touch of the Magi explosions into a 4-stacked Resonance Barrage. Felt quite nice for that build up to single target tunnel, and then that blows up on AoE, and then you dump your barrage charges to more AoE, and then you blink in, and then you Arcane Explosion, right? It felt pretty good. It felt pretty good. It gives you, by default, this is a 50% damage amp every 45 seconds. So those that were like freaking out about arcane power being this big 3-minute cooldown window now, this is every 45 seconds. Now, of course, you will line it up with your big burst window to begin with, and then you'll sort of rotate it in like 2 more times, maybe 3 more times, and then delay your next arcane power to sync everything back up. And the sync everything back up is part of the biggest pain point for Arcane right now. During the stream today, I poked some of the other more seasoned mages than myself. I'll pull over a bit of notes from them. I was talking to Dikembe back and forth quite a bit, actually, seeing what he thought of everything here. And I've sort of summarized bits and pieces here and there of what he was telling me. And then, of course, I poked Dutch, and Dutch gave me a really awesome bullet-pointed list here of what his thoughts were. So, and this is not probably just him. I imagine this is a bit of a funnel from the Altered Time Mage community. So let's see what the Mage community and Dutch had to say. He said the clear casting change is nice and makes choosing between Shimmer and Slipstream finally a more interesting choice, as you can bank a proc for movement. Slipstream is kind of bad in compared to Shimmer in 90% of the cases currently in BFA, because you only get 1 clear cast. Now you can store up to 3. Additionally, on that side, Shimmer has been drastically cut down. So when you take Shimmer, you don't have Blink anymore. And Blink is a 15-second cooldown. They're both 20 yards, but this frees you of all your stuns and bonds when you blink. Shimmer is plus 5 seconds on the cooldown for 20 seconds. It does not break your stuns and bonds, but allows you to, of course, cast while you move, which in the case of most of the time with Arcane Mage, you'll usually blink while blasting, or you'll blink while channeling an arcane missiles, everything else, of course, being instant cast. But having the Arcane Blast, Danny DeVito windows is obviously very important. Now, Slipstream allows you to bank 2-3 arcane missiles like I showed you a while ago. Mana Shield, of course, still being a stronger version of Prismatic Barrier. With the onset of more mana regeneration and potentially more mastery coming in, depending on how Savant works, even Mana Shield might have an issue, or not as much of an issue to be used. But we'll see. That obviously is very situationally dependent, because again, you can combine it if there's a fight with frost and fire damage as well with Mana Shield. Very defensible in that case too. More things from Dutch. The GCD issue has only gotten worse now with Mirror Image's baseline. The cooldown and burst window for Arcane is now a log list of roughly 5 GCDs in a row that do not do any damage by itself. Arcane Power becoming a baseline 3-minute cooldown again seems weird, because Evocation, which I didn't mention yet, is still the... My brain doesn't see it. A 90-second cooldown. So still a 1.5-minute cooldown, whereas Arcane Power is 3. But that just means that you can either just use it again, save it, or obviously use it every 90 seconds and then have a window of time without Arcane Power and a window of time with. And he says, I don't really see a reason why they do this except to make the cooldown less flexible, maybe. Dutch talks about, he said, Touch of the Magi baseline is nice since it was always picked anyway on pure single target, even though the current version that you're dealing with in BFA is random. And it's not like there was any choice there anyway. It being baseline opens up a talent slot for hopefully something nice. The premise of the new talent looks promising, but I didn't look deep into it yet. They're still obviously figuring a bunch of stuff out today and throughout the next many weeks. It'll come down to balancing on whether or not it ends up being worthwhile to actively play around or to hold it for big cooldown windows. The cross-spec Fire Blast and Frostbolt is nice, yada yada. Meaningless for a raider, adds a bit of flavor, open world content in certain situations, and getting altered time back is very neat, even if it is only the defensive option. But the Arcane Mage already has potentially pretty high defensive options in Mana Shield, and combining that with your Frost and Fire wards, and then you've got your Altered Time there as well. You can know you're taking a bunch of damage with Altered Time, like Crackles coming from Nefarian in 3, 2, 1. On the 2 mark, you put down Altered Time. You get chunked for all your health at the 0 mark, and then you Altered Time back, and you're full health again. Woohoo! You took all that damage for nothing, and then you're full health. So that is going to be pretty nice. And again, of course, mirror images for open world content. They're going to, taunt stuff. They'll take aggro from you, I guess. That's how they all used to work back in the day. So, big things for Savant. We'll see when it all gets hooked up. And Touch of the Magi, to go back to this whole thing, testing it today for like an hour and a half. It is not working properly. I will link an image down below in the description box from my combat log earlier today. What is happening here is that it looks like it takes 50% of the damage, and then takes 50% of that, and then applies that as the AoE. So it roughly is only taking about 25-ish%. Not exactly, but that's how much damage it's taking for the AoE hit. It also has some weirdness with if you are blasting a target, and you can watch this in the dungeon VOD if you want to go watch. It blasts the target. If it falls off naturally, it hits and then AoEs. If you kill the target that has it on it, just the AoE component would go off, but it's not entirely correct. Sometimes I was getting a very even spread of damage. Sometimes I was getting a one big hit and then multiple small hits. So something is not right. I sent in 3, if not 4 bug reports with a screenshot and a Twitch clip, I want to say, that was, it's not working right. However, the fall off damage, if you want to know how this is all working now, at least for this one, is there's a new damage fall off, and with target caps and all this other stuff, right? Like Barrage still stays at, you know, 1 additional nearby target for 40% of its damage per arcane charge, so it's still capped at 5 targets, right? Arcane Explosion isn't capped, hits everything within 10 yards. So not really a huge worry there. Ribbon, Nether Tempest still hits everything else, but it deals reduced damage to secondary targets. Same thing with Touch of the Magi. The formula for this is the damage of the hit is then divided by the square root of the targets that were hit. So you would take your, say, 1,000 damage, and then you divide it by the square root of you hit 7 targets. And that's the damage you should be seeing, but we're not seeing that right now with Touch of the Magi. Not all the time. So again, alpha will alpha. Also, your new additions here, Focus Magic. I actually cannot say we tested this yet, but I do not think it works. Focus Magic replaces where Mirror Images was, and it is essentially Dark Intent. And sure, right? I can't even know if, can I buff Zotomos? No, can I buff one of these guards? I can. So this target then gets 5% spell critical strike chance, even though we were looking on, all we have to go off of is this. Critical strike chance doesn't have spell specifically anymore, it's just crit. Because we were putting this on a bunch of people in the dungeon today, and on a Death Knight, I was getting some procs. On a Prot Warrior, I was getting none, and on a Ret Paladin, I was getting 1, maybe 2 here and there. We think it was only Wake of Ashes was causing it, and maybe Hammer of Wrath. Whereas a bunch of spellish things on the Unholy Death Knight were proccing it. Nothing on a Prot Warrior. And then the big thing, we had a Resto Shaman in the group, and it seemed like every spell crit heal over time reprocced it. It's actually very obnoxious. Every time it procs, it goes over your head, which I guess is nice. But when it's got multiple Riptides out and we're standing in a healing rain, it's just going It was honestly a little bit obnoxious, a little bit of just audio overload for no reason and extra noise, but its uptime was real. So pretty good. But the question I was being asked, which you did not test, we didn't get a bunch of mages together, is can you put like 5 of these on one person? I do not believe that is the case. You cannot cast on yourself. Limit 1 target means you, but I think it's also squelched that only 1 target each can have a focus magic. So if I'm a mage, I put it on this person, a different mage puts it on that person. You can't give someone 50% for you can spell crit, but I don't know if this spell will be worth much for the Arcane Mage because Rune of Power is so good. And yes, it's still here, of course. And Enchantress Flow is also pretty fine in like dungeon content and stuff where you're not standing around all day just turreting things. But Focus Magic is just intermittent 5% spell crit. So I'm not sure. But giving your Holy Paladin 5% spell crit is pretty big. Or using it on a Resto Druid. Blanketing Hots and you keep getting the 5% crit all the time. That's pretty good. And the last big one, Enlightened. This is essentially a reworked Equipoise Azerite trait. Now, this is a wonky mana restore tick rate thing bug whenever you go below the threshold when it comes back up. But Enlightened plus the change potentially to Savant, where you might care more about your mastery, and clear casting, and rank 3 Arcane Barrage, and the new Arcane Power window going to 15 seconds, makes certain things go, maybe this could work together. Because what Enlighten does is arcane damage dealt above 70% mana will be in a flat increase of 8% damage done on the mage. When you're below 70% mana, you get 20% more mana regen. So for the tail end of this video here, because we got to wrap this up a little soon, because we're definitely at time, I don't know what is going to happen here with the Arcane Mage. You do have this weird window of time where you have to put up arcane power and then cast Touch of the Magi. When you do lose some time, this is the one thing about the Arcane Mage that's strange. See, that's why we don't know if you're going to use... a little risky. Watch the mana. It's buggy. We don't know, and this will require... If just continuously doing damage in this window with the mana regen being more worth than the 8%, I wasn't staying in the Enlightened window that often in the dungeon because you're just blasting trash. Who cares, right? On bosses, I was trying to juggle bosses in the 8% additional mana damage window, rather. Because obviously, if you line it up with Arcane Power, and you've lined it up with your Touch of the Magi, and potentially Rune of Power as well, you do have this... And if you take Charged Up, which Charged Up will only really affect your opener. But then there are situations where, what if you're down the road, and you've got a Touch of the Magi and a Rune of Power up, but you've got Charged Up, and you just dumped your Barrage. You just gained back 8% of your mana, so then you could charge up, put down your rune, hit your Presence of Mind, and then this will be 3 instant spells right here. 1, 2, 3, not just 2. And then what if you tag that in the end there, and your Arcane Barrage lands, your Touch of the Magi goes off at the same time, you just got back 8% more mana, you try to stay above 70% mana. The minigame is there, right? The minigame is there, and only gets easier with trinkets that proc intellect. Or, not intellect itself, but haste, right? To be able to clip spells into the Magi window, and then to get the GCD down a little lower so you can wiggle out that barrage. It also helps with just casting things that are on the GCD, because Rune of Power is on the GCD, and casting a Touch of the Magi is obviously on the cast GCD. Casting your Mirror Images on the GCD, hitting Overcharge on the GCD, or sorry, Charged Up, not Overcharge, that's the Shaman ability. So there's something there. And depending on how you float and how the Burning Conserve window has changed, I don't know. I don't know enough about Arcane Mage, but so far the only ickiness is the the starting opener. But once you get rolling, stuff somewhat desyncs. You have these little windows every 45 or so seconds where you're playing around the Touch of the Magi DPS window. And then, of course, you line everything back up again to have 1 rune, 1 Touch of the Magi, Presence of Mind every minute. Easy to line that up into your, with or without your Mirror Images and your Arcane Power. Now, again, what I went over earlier, your Mirror Images do scale up in damage, so they have to be sort of cast a little beforehand, so that they're doing their maximum damage to add damage into your Touch of the Magi window, because they have their own arcane charges. And the 5 seconds, I think, here, which is a kind of a band-aid, is that you'll probably be casting your Arcane Power first, because your windows of time for Rune of Power and Touch of the Magi are smaller windows than a 15-second Arcane Power window, which I think Blizzard sort of understands that. They're smoothing out your Burn Conserve with the Arcane Barrage change, and Mana Gem, and possibly Enlightened, and maybe even Arcane Frequent Familiar. And obviously Rules of 3 is real good, or Rule of 3, sorry, not Rules of 3. Move the S around for some reason. And Amplification with Arcane Missiles being more of a thing. You know, Sim getting at here, it's a lot of things smushed together. Arcane Orb, if it actually scales well with Savant, could be used to have that AoE wombo combo, where you can overcharge, barrage, Arcane Orb, barrage, right? Like boom, 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 boom. All those, that huge hitting, blasting, arcane burst AoE. Or of course you go more single target. Again, maybe also Supernova. Doesn't suck. So there's a lot of stuff in this stew. And these couple of small changes, and the one big one, I would say, open up possibilities. But we will have to wait and see. What are your thoughts down below about the Arcane Mage changes? Again, go check out the VOD because I'm sort of doing different things throughout the whole dungeon and testing different like moment to moments. And it looks different on bosses than AoE. And there's some cool interplay between things. And of course you can, you know, resonance, reverberate, things of that nature, all sort of stacked together. But I think it looks pretty okay, except for the weird GCDs. And I still agree, overcharge should be off the global. You can't do anything about it until you react with a spell cast. It's kind of weird that it's still on the GCD. But let me know in the comments down below what you think. Again, I am a huge fan of Corsair. I use a bunch of their stuff before I even got partnered. But if you want to support what I do here on the channel, that upside down, it's the back of the box. Check the link down below if you would like to support what I do here and save yourself 10% and free shipping on a new mouse, new keyboard, any of the Corsair peripherals, or if you want to check out Elgato stuff for their stream decks, their capture cards. I'm using a stream deck right now to control this recording, and you can use it as a macro switchboard for your Photoshop, for your CAD, for your whatever, your After Effects, whatever you do in the real world. Check the links down below if you want to support me. And we'll have the Mage wrap-up video next. And then we're on to Fell Week, Demon Hunter and Warlock.